All right. Well, welcome today. We are happy to have you all with us. Since I'm in presentation mode, I can't see everybody's face, and it's hard to check the chat. So, Heather, if we have any questions, we can certainly answer it. So this is an informal session. I don't know if you've been to any of our other career exploration sessions. There was one last week on consulting, and we have several more coming up through the rest of this summer. So the goal with these sessions is to provide an overview. So give you a sense of what it's like to recruit in this particular business function, what the recruiting process looks like, what the resources are, time frame, things like that. So we're happy to answer questions because this really is for you and to give you a better idea of what to expect when school starts. So with that, I do have some slides prepared. We also have some CMC staff on the call, and hopefully we will be joined later in the call with by Nathan Green, who is the president of the Finance Club. He is a rising second year. He is currently doing an internship in New York in Wells Fargo, and hopefully he'll be able to join us later in this session to answer some questions and to talk about the resources in the Finance Club as well. So with that, I'll get started. And I just want to introduce the team. So those of you that have been involved in other presentations we've done, perhaps you've been on campus for Welcome Weekend or a Discover Weekend, or have been on another virtual workshop, you recognize some of the faces, but just wanted to throw these up again. Specifically for finance, we do have two folks on the team, me and Heather Yockey, that work primarily with students interested in finance. You can, of course, talk to anybody, but because Heather's working directly with companies that are recruiting in the finance function and especially in financial services. And then over the years, I've worked with students that have been interested in the finance career path. And we also are working through the Finance Club as well. So we are the primary contacts for careers in finance. However, we understand that many of you are still exploring. You may not know exactly where you want to go. So you may be just out there sampling right now. So that's great. But just want to give you a sense of who are the folks that work primarily with finance recruiting. And so on this call, we just want to give you an overview of what the MBA finance careers look like, what the time frame is, so what recruiting time frames look like, how much time you will spend in recruiting, and then resources to help you go through this whole process and develop your recruiting plan. So we'll get started with some overview. And just to begin, many of you probably already seen this slide, but we just want to, again, reemphasize that recruiting at the MBA level is, it's a multi-pronged approach, because the great thing about the MBA degree is it's very broad, but that's also could be one of the more confusing aspects of recruiting in the MBA space, in that it is very broad. So you will have many classmates that want to do different things, some in finance, but also in other business functions in different industries. So because of that, there's a multi-pronged approach to supporting you. The underlying platform is 1220. It's the career system. It's where job postings are, where you'll see events, where there's data that will help you to navigate this, including interview questions and things like that. So 1220 is our base. And then on top of that, we have CMC coaches, so people to work with you individually or in small groups. Heather leads the employer engagement group, so they are working directly with the employers, but they also interact a lot with the students, because we're trying to create a platform for communication between employers back to the students on what recruiting is looking like in any given year. And then also the student clubs. So Nathan will represent the finance club, but they also have programming that's very specific to careers in finance. And so you will be engaging with them as well. So there's a lot of support for careers, and we encourage you to take advantage of all of this. So specifically speaking to finance, as MBAs come into the program and start focusing on particular career paths as they exit the program or the outcome, this is generally speaking what we've seen over the last 5 years. So you can see somewhere around a little over a quarter of the class will have an outcome in a business function that is considered finance. So right now, that's been one of the larger areas. Consulting's right up there, marketing, general management, operations management, HR, IT. So you can see this is a classic profile of what outcomes are from a business school, and we certainly fit right in with that. And so you can see there's a lot of students. There'll be probably a quarter of your class are interested in career paths in finance. So you'll have a lot of support along the way, not only with your class, but with the MBA class of 2024, so the rising second years as well. So within finance, it's various different subcategories. And some of you may know exactly what you want to do. Others of you may be still exploring different areas, but from an MBA level standpoint, this is kind of how outcomes have been over the most recent time frame. So a little less than 40% of students wind up going in a finance career path in a corporate setting. So that would mean like working in finance at a company like Amazon or American Airlines, or another corporate company like that. About a 30% take a path in investment banking. So an investment banking company, a financial services company like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Jefferies, these folks are going into a traditional MBA recruiting path. There's the banks have been hiring MBAs for years and years and years to go into investment banking. So they are an intermediary between the corporate entity and the money markets. So about 30% of the ON students have pursued that path over the last 5 years. And then after that, it is smaller. So some in private wealth management. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but basically that is money management for extremely high net worth individuals and families. So it's usually in excess of assets, liquid assets or investable assets that are well over $10 million, probably even higher than that now. So many of these financial services companies, the large banks, they have groups that are the private wealth investors for wealthy individuals and families. And then, of course, there's private equity and venture capital. There's some that folks go into that, as well as traditional investment management, which is investing for institutions. So this would be mutual funds, endowments, pension funds, so large entities that invest money into various asset classes. So I wanted to give you a little bit more, sorry, I've skipped a slide. A little bit more information about what it's like to recruit in these various major buckets. So we'll start with investment banking because it has probably one of the most structured and most involved recruiting process. So remember, with investment banking, the banks are hiring individuals to come in from the MBA program at an associate level. And these are client-facing jobs. So clients will be companies that need to go to the market for either cash, or they are going to be divesting parts of their companies. They may be acquiring other parts of their companies. So investment banking is an intermediary role with client-facing work. So not only do you have to understand the financial aspects, because think of yourself as a financial consultant to these companies, you're also going to be, as a part of the recruiting process, tested in your ability to be in front of a client. So that's one of the reasons why investment banking recruiting is more involved than perhaps some other types of recruiting, because they're not only testing financial knowledge, they're testing you on your ability to work in a client-facing role. Because of that, networking has been ingrained in the process with investment banking. And if you think about the whole process of trying to be successful in the recruiting for an investment bank, your first step when you're networking just to get on an interview list. Once you get on an interview list, then you're tested more on your financial knowledge. But again, that's why this process is more lengthy, more involved, and it's going to require you to get out, meet a lot of people, learn about the roles, but also you're also engaging with them so they can see your demonstrated client-facing ability. The Finance Club works an awful lot with students that are interested in recruiting in the investment banking path, because it tends to be more involved than other processes. So there's lots of support. You would go through this with your cohort of fellow students that also want to do this. So you're not on your own with this, but it will take time. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what the time commitment is a little bit later on. As a part of all of this, because it is time consuming, because the work is also time consuming, they're also going to be asking, as you're developing your network in these banks, they're also going to be looking to see what your actual motivation is to go down this path. Right now, where you sit, you don't have to be completely committed. You're still in the evaluation stage. So if you're talking to anybody in your own network about investment banking, you can still feel pretty confident that they are not going to judge you overly right now, because you could still be in an exploratory phase. But I would say later in September and in October, you will be evaluated on your desire to be an investment banker. So right now is a good time to gather information. Later into the fall, you'll have to be talking to people about why you want to be an investment banker. So I just want to get that out up front. And then as you go through the process, certainly later in the fall, you will be tested on some financial knowledge. So the thing that's always difficult in investment banking recruiting is many people are coming in outside of a finance role prior to school. So there is some learning that needs to happen as far as how to answer some of these more technical finance questions. The Finance Club is really integral in all of this. Plus, we have some online tools to help you get up to speed even over the summer on some of this stuff. But you need to be expected to learn some things even before you've gotten the same information in class. You will have finance as a core class. It will be in Mod 1, so you'll be in the middle of it as school starts. But just want to, get that out there, that knowing something about finance is going to be important in the interview process for investment banking. So the other side is corporate finance. So when you think of the bankers, they're going to be talking to the people in the corporate entity, and corporations hire a lot in the finance function. And in a lot of corporations, especially larger ones, they have developed their own rotational programs or training programs within the finance function, and they're usually sponsored by the chief financial officer in the company. So these programs could be called rotational programs, or they could be called leadership development programs within the finance function. So you'll see these things, there are quite a few of them in the MBA landscape. So when you would go into an organization, as a financial professional, you would probably be rotated through several different functions. It could be financial planning and analysis. It could be treasury. In some cases, it could even be investor relations. But there's various finance functions that are under the chief financial officer that you would be able to have exposure to before you would exit out into a full-time role. These leadership development programs could last a year. They could last up to 3 years, where you're rotating through different groups. So there you will see those and as a part of the recruiting process, and they will usually have it in the job title. It'll have financial leadership development program in the job title. These programs, or these companies that have these leadership development programs, are often in industries or companies where financial strategy is super important. You can take, for example, airlines. Airlines often have a financial leadership development program because their overall corporate financial strategy is, or their strategy is based on finances. Because when you think about it, an airline is providing the same service. United is providing basically the same service that American, that Southwest, all of these, they're doing the same thing. They're moving people with a fixed asset, an airplane. But the things that they would be looking at are pricing, fuel hedging, labor relations, how much pilots, but pilots contracts, all of that stuff. So in these types of industries, financial strategy is super important, and you will see in those types where there's you may have a higher number of financial leadership development programs in those types of industries. So then moving on to private equity and venture capital. So a lot of people have aspirations to go into either private equity or venture capital, which is great. But because these industries are smaller, they also hire fewer people, and they look for specific backgrounds and skill sets. So if you're coming in with a very strong finance and accounting background, especially if you've done a lot of financial modeling, it's a possibility. But just know that it is much more difficult for somebody that doesn't have a traditional finance background to move in right out of the gate post MBA into these roles. I can't say that it won't happen, but it is definitely harder to do because they do look for finance backgrounds more so than the others do. The other thing to know about VC, and especially private equity, they could have an investing or a finance role, but some of these companies are actually looking for operations people. So if in their portfolio of companies that they've invested in, they have the ability to bring in operations people, you might see that there's opportunities to work in a private equity backed company, but in an operating role, not necessarily in a finance role. So that's something to keep in mind. And then because these are also very small industries in comparison to the broader set of corporate and financial services industry, networking will be important with that too. And then finally, in investment management, the thing to notice, there's a difference between who the client is. And we talked a little bit about with the client in being in institutional things like, so pension funds, endowments, or mutual funds, things like that, versus private wealth, which the client is a high net worth individual or a family office that has a lot of investable assets. So financial services firms hire in both of those areas. There's a lot of push, especially on the MBA level. You'll see a lot around private wealth, and most people will have questions of, is this brokerage? Is it like brokerage? Generally speaking, it is not, because your number of clients is far less. You would be working on a team that would be working with 10 to maybe 20 clients instead of 500 clients on the brokerage side of things.
And Emily, I had a quick question from
Sure.
Connor. who
Yeah.
was asking, would you say that holding companies that operate similarly to PE firms have similar recruiting metrics to PE firms, typically looking for IB experience, et cetera, or that it's easier to get through the door at a holding company?
It really depends. It's hard to say what role. It's going to depend on the role itself. So if it's investing the money in a holding company has money to invest in another entity, they're still going to want valuation experience. But they also might have, similar to a PE firm, a role that could be a financial role in one of the companies. So it would be more equivalent to a corporate finance role, creating the budget, doing financial planning and analysis, that type of stuff. Or it could be an operating role where you're working on metrics around the internal operations of the company. I hope that explains some of it.
I think Connor was pleased with the answer. So
okay, good. And as you'll hear from us a lot of these questions are going to be dependent upon the company themselves. So we try to give you some overall, but it's hard to give blanket information because things could change depending on the role itself. So just a little disclaimer there. So we did talk a little bit about MBA financial leadership development programs. Here's just some more detail around that. Companies that want to plan their financial bench, so the pathway to a CFO, whether it's over the whole organization or a business unit of the organization, they are investing resources to organically grow, mentor, train their financial bench. So that's why they go to MBA programs. They're looking for people that not only know the finance as a function, but also are good managers. So that's where the MBA itself comes in, working more holistically across different groups, because finance, you're going to work with marketing, you'll work with operations, you'll work with HR, you'll work across all these business functions. So from a company standpoint, that's another reason that they would tap into the MBA pool. An advantage for somebody going into one of these programs is there's generally a path to management. So you may go in, you may have an assignment for a period of time, you would be rotated, but you would also be exposed to senior leadership, not only in the finance organization, but hopefully across the company. And so there's mentorship available. It's like a continuation of your degree program, really, when you go into these leadership development programs. You're usually in with a cohort of students, and they're training you specifically to be a leader in that organization. They do tend to focus a lot of recruiting on the internship. So from a company standpoint, their goal would be to identify you in your first year, have you join, have a successful internship, and then return as a full-time candidate. So that's why there's a lot of emphasis on internship recruiting for these programs, because from the company standpoint, they would love to have a very good match and a good experience. For you as an intern, you would already have some familiarity with the company and the management and the roles before you came in full time. These FLD programs are across multiple industries. We do have a list in 1220. It's not inclusive of everyone, but you can get an idea of companies that do have these financial leadership development programs. Things that you might do as an intern in these programs: you might do a lot of forecasting, you might build financial models, you might build pricing models, you might do benchmarking, you might be measuring performance. So a lot of analytical things happen in these internships, but it does give you a broad perspective as to what is going on in the company with not only with their revenue, but with their cost. Do they have aspirations of changing their financial strategy. They may be acquiring another entity. They may be acquiring a product, or they may be divesting things. So the interesting thing about these programs, it's pretty high level exposure to what's going on in the company itself. Any questions about FLDPs? All right. Okay, so we also talked a little bit about private equity, venture capital. So one thing to expect about all of these roles is there's a lot of networking that's involved. You work a lot with clients. The expectation is that you are going to be able to meet, talk, converse with your network. And so building a network for these opportunities is a part of every process. They are generally more competitive because there are fewer roles in them. And as I said before, it does help with private equity and venture capital have some experience in corporate valuation. So even with these roles too, because they are competitive, they are driven more by financial knowledge and macro environmental knowledge. So you're going to be tested a lot on that. So overall, I would say these roles are harder for big career switchers, but not impossible. If you really want to do it, I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but I want you to have the expectation that there is a lot of legwork that has to happen to be successful in these recruiting processes if you're not coming from a similar background.
And Emily, if we take it back a click to the corporate finance, we have a student asking, what's the program concentration that better suits a career in corporate finance leadership development?
Like an academic concentration?
I think that is the question,
So,
but if you want to add to that, feel free.
Yeah, so I actually did one of these when I got out of school. So I would say one of the good things about the curriculum at Owen is you can have multiple concentrations. So you're going to want to have finance as one of your concentrations, but you could also do marketing or operations or HR. You could do any of the other business functions that you find most interesting, and that would be good. One of the things you can think about, and we could talk about it individually, but depending on the type of company, if it's a consumer-driven company, like say a financial leadership development program in a big brand company like Procter and Gamble, it might make more sense to get a dual concentration in marketing. It just kind of depends, but overall, any business function compared with finance can be, leveraged into one of these roles. So I wanted to just, show a general timeline of MBA recruiting. So you may have seen this before. And we'll just be honest with you that things have changed since COVID with regards to timelines, because there's more virtual recruiting. There's a lot more company engagement, but they may not actually be on campus, but they're still actively seeking MBAs. And because it's virtual, you don't have the same constraints of, well, you can't come on campus until September 7th. So the time frame has gotten broader, but generally speaking, what you will see is most companies will begin recruiting sometime in early September. So that means they will have presentations, whether they're on campus or virtual. They'll be listed in 1220, and you will go to these company engagements. They may also have networking sessions like coffee chats or office hours as they are engaging with you with their company presentations. Another thing that this is all in this early time period when you're just getting your exposure to these companies and how they use MBAs in their organizations. Another thing to keep in mind are these national career fairs. And there's going to be additional information coming out about national career fairs, but there are, generally speaking, diversity career fairs that happen in September and October. They were originated for recruiting diverse candidates Some are open to all candidates. So for example, National Black is open to all students. Companies will have booths at these large career fairs in various locations. And they will have company representatives there to meet and greet MBA candidates. They will have a website. There could be job postings on that website, so you may be able to engage and have an interview at these national career fairs. And we'll talk a little bit more about should you consider them or not, but just want to let you know that they are out there. I will say if you're a military veteran, there's an MBA Veterans Career Fair that's very good. It's specifically for veterans. It's not open to everybody. It's just open to veterans, and that would definitely be something to consider, and it's in October. But overall, investment banking interviews have consolidated to happen before winter break. They're in late November. So that time frame is, generally speaking, if you're investment banking, you'll probably have an offer before winter break. Everybody else, it could happen anywhere from September through spring break. So it's a pretty wide open schedule. And Heather, since you deal with this all the time, I don't know if you have any particular insight you want to add to that.
Well, we have some questions that have percolated below while you've been talking, and one of them kind of is rushing ahead to the summer, which I wish with some of our first years could be on the call. But the question is kind of surrounding like, is it generally expected that there will be a return offer for summer internships in finance, IB roles, LDP specifically? Because they were referring to the consulting, I believe, session that was earlier and kind of talking about what offers look like and if it's expected. So can you talk a little to
Sure.
that?
Overall, on the corporate finance LDP programs, generally speaking, I would say 80 to 90% return with an offer. The only thing that could keep you from an offer is poor performance in your internship. So, your own, how well you do, it could be a limiting factor, or if there's a major economic event in the summer. But generally speaking, yes, you would go into this role with the goal of receiving an offer. And many of the firms, we wish all of the firms gave you enough time through the fall to make a decision so you could go back through fall recruiting in your second
Emily,
year.
actually, as it turns out, Nathan Green has joined the call right at this moment. Just FYI, the current student who's in his internship right now, he might speak a little to
Okay.
that. Just letting you know
All
that
right.
he's here.
Hi, Nathan, you here?
Yeah. Hey, can everybody hear me?
So Nathan is
good.
yes. So Nathan
Okay.
is rising president of the finance club, and he is currently in New York at Wells Fargo. So we were just going
guys.
through timelines.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll go ahead and chime in on the expectation question as far as return offer for internships. I believe all of our students last year did get a return offer that were in kind of our core investment banking summer internships. When it comes to timelines and that sort of thing, I might have jumped on a little bit late, but effectively, all the offers are given out pre the end of Mod 2. And so most offers are given out right around the Thanksgiving period. And so that's kind of one of the great benefits of doing the investment banking track is in the event that maybe you don't get the offers that you particularly wanted, or maybe you strike out across the board, which, didn't really happen last year, you do have the chance to then go pursue great LDP opportunities as well. So just chime in, and Emily and Heather, if you guys want to kind of get back to regular scheduled programs, or if we want to take questions, either works for me.
Well, I have the next slide is actually about investment banking recruiting. So Nathan, you want to, this might be a good time for you to kind of talk through what your fall last year looked like.
Sure. Yeah. So effectively, you're going to come in, and if you want to do the finance investment banking track, you're going to have about a week of getting to know everybody, another week of starting to ascertain which firms you're interested in, and kind of start your tracker spreadsheet, so to speak. And then it literally is off to the races. Banks are coming in now early to mid-September. And what happens is they normally come on campus for a series of informational sessions. All that's going to be is you show up for about an hour. They're going to go through the bank's background. They're going to introduce you to a couple of the bankers, especially those that are Owen alum. And then afterwards, there will be a happy hour where you'll get the chance to meet the bankers. I would highly recommend going to all the information sessions, even with banks that you may not necessarily feel interested in, because they do check attendance. And so, when it comes down to later on down the line, maybe you struck out with your top bank, if you don't go to all the information sessions, it could hurt you come recruiting time. It's also a good chance to meet, the different bankers on these firms. The culture of a lot of these banks are very different. And the culture even within offices of these banks are very different. And so I think it's really important to cast a wide net, to go to all the info sessions and meet everybody that you can, even if you don't necessarily, have an interest in going to that particular institution. It's good to create connections. And worst case, what some students did is they would interview at all the banks. Maybe they weren't as interested in others, but they would really use them as a live rep, so to speak, when they were interviewing, to where when they did interview at the bank that they really wanted, they were polished and ready to go. Interviewing is something you have to practice. We do that a lot in Finance Club, but it is something very important. And so as you start moving through September, the info sessions start to die down. And about mid-October, we're going to have the New York Trek, which is an opportunity for students to travel to New York and actually go on site to many of these banks and financial institutions. So last year, we visited Wells, where I am now, at the Hudson Yards here in New York. We visited Jefferies, we visited TD, which is at One Vanderbilt, beautiful office. And then we visited Goldman Sachs for private wealth. So it's a really neat trip, even if you may not have a ton of interest in ending up in New York, to get a good kind of overview of the city and the different offices and places where you may be working. So once the trek is over, we call the next week kind of the coffee chat blitz. And that's when you're going to have probably 20 to 30 coffee chats in 1 week with bankers that you've just met on the New York track. And this is really important because a lot of firms do measure the amount of kind of touch points that you had with that firm as an indication of interest. And so, again, you get back from the New York trek, you kind of have this coffee chat blitz. From there, we're going to have the investment banking case competition, which is going to take place in late October. And then throughout this entire time, you're getting ready for your interviews. You're getting ready as far as the technical preparation is going for your internship. Right around, I'd say, mid-November to late November is when official interviews happen. And then from there, offers are extended. Of course, speaking on the non-diversity, non-veteran track, those tracks are a little different, and they're handled specifically by kind of the diverse recruiters that I guess are applicable to those particular groups. And so again, can pause there. I know there's a lot of information, and answer any questions y'all may have about that.
Any questions that Nathan can answer? I know it seems overwhelming right now, but once you're going through the process with your fellow students, it's a lot of work, but it's not nearly as confusing once you're in the middle of it.
No, it's not. And use Finance Club as a resource. I certainly did last year. It's a great opportunity to get, one-on-ones really with second years that can help you through all of these things. I'll say that last year we had more spots than we had people for investment banking. So we actually left a couple of job offers on the table. We had those who got multiple offers and took one, and there wasn't another Owen student that got that offer. And so, it's interesting because like investment banking, I think, is something, I don't know, but I'm sure we've talked about this, Emily, but it's something where I think interest with MBA students has probably dropped off throughout the years. But the interest among the actual recruiters, i.e. the banks and financial institutions, has not dropped off. And so it's an interesting mismatch. And it's really exciting work. I mean, if you really want to do finance, if finance is interesting to you, and high finance particularly is interesting to you, it's certainly something that I would definitely consider.
Nathan, do you recommend any of these different website like Wall Street Oasis or Street of Walls or things like that they could look at now to kind of get a better sense?
Yeah, so I believe the Corporate Finance Institute has a great overview of the different roles within a bank in general, a buy-side institution. And so like they go through, I believe, private wealth, they go through investment banking, they go through like risk management, that sort of thing. It just gives you a kind of just an idea of what financial roles and careers are out there, be that investment banking, sales and trading, whatever. I'd highly recommend that. As far as early on technical prep or anything like that, I probably wouldn't do that. Craig Rothenberg, who is a very technically gifted colleague of mine, did that in the summer, and he felt as though it helped, but I did not, and ended up getting placed here in the M&A group at Wells, and so I feel perfectly okay with where I am technically. I can assure you, it's not like things are going over my head because I did my preparation in the second half of the school year. And another thing, on that note that I'll mention is because of the early timelines that you have in investment banking, you are going to work very hard in mod 1 and 2. But past mod 2, especially if you're not matching within your bank, I mean, you're pretty much on cruise control for half the year, and you can take the classes you want to take. You can kind of do what you want to do. That's contrast to students that might try the consulting track, the track that's a little later than us, and then maybe not get the consulting firm that they want, or not get a role that they find interesting, and then have to kind of scramble into mod 3. And so I think that's a huge benefit of the investment banking track. I'll also say too that in the event that you do investment banking for the summer and you feel like this isn't for you, or maybe you really didn't feel like you could make the work-life balance work, it's very easy then to recruit for another field. Whereas if you do another field and then you kind of realize, hey, I wanted to do investment banking, I should have done that, it's very difficult to recruit in without that summer experience. So again, just a couple of nuggets of things to take into account.
Nathan,
Thanks.
it looks like Connor had a follow-up question. Did you take any financial classes such as Wall Street prep early on and outside of class, or did you know anyone that did not have financial background that did so?
Yeah, great question. So I'll go ahead and list my background. I worked for the state of Tennessee Treasury Department during the COVID crisis, and so ended up working in their risk department. I do have 2 financial certifications, so I'll preference what I say with that. I did do some outside prep. I used the Corporate Finance Institute CFI. They have a great program called the MBA, the Financial Modeling Evaluations Analyst. I was doing that before Vanderbilt, but I'll say when I was getting ready for my internship, I just used the month of May effectively, and I just went through everything. Training the Street was very helpful. You get Training the Street as a suite from Vanderbilt, which I'll add that, we were getting the official training for our summer internship here, and it was a Training the Street instructor. And so there was a lot of other folks from different business schools that didn't have access to Training the Street that were frankly scrambling. I'm sure y'all appreciated the email, but I actually sent Heather an email like from the happy hour after saying, thank you so much for getting Training the Street. So you're in a great position as far as, technical understanding and courses that are available to you just by being at Vanderbilt. If you want to build on that, happy to have a conversation, outside of this forum with you on if you still feel like you haven't gone deep enough on some of these topics.
Thanks, Nathan.
Sure.
With that, wanted to go through a couple of other things. National career fairs, they've been mentioned before, and I would say by and large, for investment banking, they are not necessarily that helpful, except perhaps for MBA veterans. But I would say for corporate financial leadership development programs, one of the larger career fairs like National Black or Perspanica, which is for Hispanic students, but those 2 are open to all students. There are more companies, big corporate companies, that come and have representatives from the for the financial leadership development programs. I don't know if either one of you have any more comments on those, but overall, it's not just a hot spot for a lot of banking at these national career fairs. And now Nathan may be able to weigh in on this. Wanted to give you kind of an example of what your time might look like as you are going through recruiting processes in the fall. So with someone exploring investment banking or private equity, venture capital, but mostly investment banking, what's your time commitment? Well, it could be anywhere up to 20 to 25 hours a week as you go through the fall because of the networking that's involved with it, attending events that are sponsored not only through Owen, but also by the banks themselves, preparing for a case competition, going to New York for a trek, things like that. So you would be very busy, and you would need to think about investment banking recruiting kind of equivalent to taking an additional class. And so just want you to be prepared as you come in. You will be working with a lot of your fellow classmates. You're not in this alone. You'll be working a lot with the finance club, but there is a lot of effort that goes into the recruiting process. And I think Nathan sort of outlined it earlier when he was discussing it, but I don't know if you have any more comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that as you come into your MBA program, one of the biggest things that you want to be able to do is build a network. For me, that was a huge consideration to going and getting my MBA. I'll say that I have made some of the best friends that I've had. I mean, was in college, in a fraternity. I mean, did all of it just by the folks that I went through the investment banking recruiting with. You're going to spend a lot of time with these people. And I'm so excited that I was able to build the relationships that I have. Another thing too is I think it's a great point to say you're not going through this alone. I mean, it is really a team-based sport almost for us, and you're going to be working on technicals with your fellow classmates. You're going to be helping them with their technicals. When it comes down to the case competition, you're going to be working together on that. I mean, this is something that I think builds a lot of camaraderie. Another thing too is I think it looks and feels very difficult from the outside in. The way I like to think about it is you're going to put about the same time that you're in investment banking recruiting that you would into consulting recruiting or in any other major MBA employer. It's just how the time is spread out. The investment banking recruiting is very concentrated kind of in mods 1 and 2. So you're going to put a lot more time and effort into mods 1 and 2. But then once you get those offers, I mean, you're kind of just going to hang out and you're going to have those offers by Thanksgiving. You're going to go home. There's a situation. I know this was with a couple of my classmates where your mod 2 grades didn't even matter. The only grades that really mattered for them were mod 1. And from then on out, they were good, especially if they get a return offer. And so I think a lot of people view this as more of like, a really intensive and very difficult endeavor. I think it's the difference between running a sprint and maybe running a medium distance race, right? You're still going to be running pretty hard. It just depends on at what length and over what time period it's split over.
Good point. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Conversely, this is from a corporate standpoint. If you're recruiting on a corporate side, you're still going to be spending time, but I would say the biggest difference is it's spread out over a longer period. As Nathan said, it's not as concentrated to have everything happen, including all your interviews before winter break. And also the amount of required networking is going to be less because you're not building that professional network, because generally speaking, they're not client-facing roles where you're getting you're being assessed based on your ability to build a network. So there's still a lot of support. It's still work. We don't want to say that recruiting is not work. There's always work involved with it, but it tends to be less time consuming than investment banking recruiting. So with that, wanted to just remind you of a couple of other things. There's resources and events that are in the resource library. I've added some stuff for finance in the folder for the incoming MBA resource. And when you're exploring careers, go into the finance folder, because there's some extra things, including where the class of 2024 are doing their internships in finance, so you can get a sense of where they are. There's also resume reviews. So for those of you on the call, it would be great if you could do your resume review over the summer, because as Nathan has said, and we've put out there, there's a lot of stuff that happens right when school starts. So if you can get your resume off of the list of things that you need to do, that would be great. We are going to be available through the course of the summer. I recognize some of the names that are on the call now, so met with a few of you. So we will be available to do resume reviews and answer questions over the course of the summer. So take advantage of that by scheduling an appointment in 1220. You can go in and select. You can select anybody if you want to have your resume review with me. My name's on the drop-down list, and I have hours every week. So you can do that as well. And then Nathan mentioned training the street. So in the finance folder, there is a link to the online classes. There's 6 modules in the Training the Street portfolio. For those of you that want to start doing some of this stuff over the summer, those are available to you. As Nathan said, he did his in mod 3 or 4, so in the spring semester, which is fine as well, because these are open to you all year. We will also have the Training the Street, some live classes. I believe there's 2 live classes that are scheduled in the fall as well. So take advantage of these resources. They're here to help you be prepared from the technical side of things, as well as there's a refresher course in Excel if you need to improve some of your Excel skills. And so with that, just some advice for achieving your goals is to start paying attention as you are now. It's great you're on this call, you're getting your information, you're getting exposed to where you can find resources, and understanding what the recruiting process is going to look like. If you can do your resume review over the summer, that would be great. And if you could work on your LinkedIn profile, that's also a good thing to do on the summer. So once you get your resume in good shape, you can transfer that to your LinkedIn profile. Another thing you could do over the summer is look at job descriptions, because these job descriptions will be the basis for what recruiting will look like. They're going to be looking for candidates that can demonstrate either the skills or the attributes that are in job descriptions. So you can just Google investment banking associate jobs, and you'll see job descriptions. They're often very similar bank to bank, so you can kind of get a sense of what they'll be looking for. Likewise with any of the other roles in finance, you can just take a look at some job descriptions to kind of get your mind wrapped around what types of things they'll be assessing candidates on. And then because recruiting is like anything else, there's no guarantees with anything. We'll be encouraging you to still have a parallel process. As Nathan said earlier, if you're going in investment banking, if things don't work out, there's corporate finance, there's other ways to have a very successful finance career path. So we'll be, working with you individually on what your plans would be on that side of things. And then finally, some challenges. So just to make sure, if we haven't hit this home enough, time management is going to be something that you're going to need to be aware of as you go into the fall. You will be having homework, you'll be working in groups, you'll have a lot of classwork. There's a lot of social activity that happens in these full-time MBA programs. So the fun stuff always happens, but then recruiting is also going on at the same time. So if you're one of the people that can manage their time very well, and they're organized, that's going to be to your benefit as you head into the fall. If that's not a strong suit for you, be aware of that and take some steps to try to help yourself in that, because you don't want to miss out on opportunities that only come around in the fall. So be on top of things, make sure you're checking email. You'll be using Teams or other methods of communication. So be on top of all of that. There are a lot of recruiting events. You're going to have a full calendar. You may have to make choices. That's where talking to your classmates, talking to us, talking to your second years can help you make the appropriate choices as you are trying to schedule your time. In many of these finance career paths, you're going to have or demonstrate technical knowledge often before you get it in class. So all of these extracurricular resources are there to help you bone up on your finance knowledge even before you go into interviews. And then just be aware, a lot of things are out of your control. The economy is out of your control. You can't do anything about the economy. So that's, again, a reason to have a multi-pronged approach. You will also not be able to control whether interviews are in person or virtual. Companies decide that. So it's going to be important for you to be able to perform well, but in both ways, in person or a virtual session as well. So practice is the key to that. So just be aware of things that are beyond what you can control and be adaptable to changing situations, because in every year there's always some curveball that happens. Sometimes they're great curveballs and sometimes it's a roadblock that you have to navigate around. So with that, that's all the prepared information we have. So any other questions that we can answer?
Emily, there were a couple of questions
Okay.
that were tossed out, and one of them I think is around Nathan and your impressive background of sort of doing a lot of training. It sounds like prior to your internship. So the question is, do you find or did others, find it difficult to get an IB internship in the first few months without previous IB technical experience?
No. Jay Karkulis, great guy, was a former teacher and landed at Jeffries and is killing it from what I hear in his first few weeks. As a matter of fact, I would argue that while a finance background can make you stronger in the technicals, can actually hurt you in some of the more soft skills, because bankers hire MBAs because they don't have the same viewpoints, and they bring a different perspective to the ball game than those that have been in the financial industry. And so I would just very strongly harp on the fact that you do not have to have a finance background to get a really good offer.
I agree.
And one other specific question, kind of getting into the weeds, but what's the degree of importance of programming language, Python, et cetera, for IB recruiting?
Yeah, there is absolutely no requirement to know a programming language. I have not used one line of code since I've been here. I don't think I will use a line of code unless it's in VBA, which is Visual Basic. It's basically in Excel. I would not put that high up on your list. That said, you do have a statistics class that is opened up. Yasin Allen teaches it, and he does require you to know R. Again, that first mod GPA is incredibly important. So if you do want to, kind of take a step out and learn a language, R would be something that I think would help you out a lot in mod 1.
And one final question of these three, favorite Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, or The Economist? What's your go-to?
That's a good question.
Oh yeah, that is a great question. So I read the Journal because everybody reads the Journal. That's why. And so also when you get FactSet, and I highly recommend getting this set up, they have huge street summaries that cover pretty much everything you need to know from a macro and even really micro standpoint. They have specific sector summaries too that they send out. So I would highly recommend, once you kind of get through the door, get FactSet set up and get those emails and just start reading through them and be a sponge for information.
The library databases that you will have access to include FactSet, PitchBook, CapIQ. So you'll have access to a lot of that on campus here.
And I'll say this, it's another thing that's a contrast to a lot of the business schools that my colleagues are from. We have access to pretty much everything. A lot of them, some of them don't have FactSet, some of them don't have Cap IQ. Most of them do not have Bloomberg. I mean, so you guys are very lucky in that regard.
Well, thank you all for joining, and Nathan, thanks especially. I hope you're having a good day there, and we look forward to hearing from you again. But thanks everyone, and hopefully we answered your questions. If not, send us an email, and we'll try to get back to you soon. All right. Thanks all.